All right, joining us today on Pirate Radio Live, Shane Connuck from the Charlotte Observer. Shane, how you doing today?
Doing great. How we doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for taking time out of your day. I know it's a busy weekend up there in Charlotte. Coming off a busy weekend this past weekend with the PGA Championship. Did you get a chance to go out there?
I did. I'm not for the competition days. Was out there in a couple of the days leading up to it. You got a whole interesting, never seen before experience. If you don't like having to go to a concession stand and pull out your wallet and pay $20 for a beer, you still have to probably do that. But you just walk in, you get a burger, you get a side, you get a drink, and you can go in as many times as you want. It's a first of its kind kind of thing that the PGA Championship has done 3 years in a row now. So I got to see that before the doors opened for the competition down at Quail Hollow.
That's crazy. So, how did that work? You just walked in, grabbed something, and left?
Yeah, every ticket is an all-inclusive ticket to go to the concession markets as many times as you would like during the day.
Dang. That sounds like a good business model. Hopefully, a lot more follow suit. But busy weekend this weekend with the Coca-Cola 600 in Charlotte. Are you going to be at the race covering that?
Oh yeah, I'll be there all weekend. We got ARCA Trucks Xfinity Series and the NASCAR Cup Series and a fun 3-day weekend in the an America's Home for Racing.
Which is your favorite to cover? ARCA, Truck, Xfinity, Cup?
Well, there's nothing like the NASCAR Cup Series on Sundays, obviously, but that's the thing about NASCAR that you can go on Saturday, you can get a good Xfinity Series race at about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and that could be a great event to watch in and of itself. And a great job the CW has been doing broadcasting those races this year. Those truck races on Friday nights are fun. And this past year at Daytona, you had a really entertaining ARCA race in the afternoon after one of those ARCA races ended at past 1 in the morning and had people watching it a year before. So you never know what you're going to get from NASCAR National Series races.
Yeah, this weekend in Charlotte, Kyle Larson going to be pulling double duty, or at least try to once again running the Indy 500 and the Coke 600. Uh, do you think he's going to be able to pull it off, or is it going to be like last year where he may not make it in time?
We'll have to see on Sunday. The weather is going to be hopefully going to be his friend, but that was the biggest thing a year ago. The timing seems to be planning out a little bit better this year. At least he's making NASCAR really a little bit more of a priority, as that was something they talked about last year when he had to fly in to North Wilkesboro a week before after running in the Fast Six at Indy. He came over to North Wilkesboro earlier in the day last Sunday. So it feels like it's all a little bit more planned out. Kyle told me on a call last week he feels a little bit more focused this year. He feels a little bit more like he's been through the motions. He's hanging out at Indy, sitting on pit wall. He realizes the scope and magnitude of this event. And again, it's because he has been a part of it. He's worked with the engineers of Arrow McLaren. He's worked with his race team at Hendrick Motorsports in Charlotte and has been preparing to do this once again for a long time. It feels like if all goes to plan, Kyle Larson can become the first driver since Tony Stewart to pull off the vaunted double.
Yeah, I've been keeping up with NASCAR a lot. We got a pool going on here. We all have like 5 drivers and just keep up with it on a weekly basis. But one thing I've noticed about Kyle Larson, and I may be wrong on this, but he's kept that same level of aggressiveness without being as reckless in years past. Am I right on that?
He has. I mean, he has been one of the best drivers in the Cup Series this year, once again, week in and week out. And yeah, he hasn't been necessarily, if he hasn't, for example, a driver like Ryan Blaney has been consistent this year. He hasn't gotten a victory lane yet, but he's had, I think, now 3 did not finishes. You look at a driver who's been able to be as consistent as Kyle Larson and Christopher Bell, who've been able to get their wins when they get them. Christopher Bell just won the NASCAR All-Star race, and just being able to finish races strong. And that's why those are the guys who are toward and Kyle Larson at the top of the Cup Series standings.
You mentioned Christopher Bell winning the All Star race. What were your thoughts on that format? It kind of weirder than normal, I think, with the promoter caution or whatever. But what were your thoughts on the format of the race last weekend?
It was a fun race. It was a fun all-star race. A year ago, or 2 years, at now 3 straight years at North Wilkesboro. The first 2 years, you saw first Kyle Larson dominate toward the end, and win that race as one of the best drivers. And a year ago, Joey Logano, the eventual Cup Series champion for the third time, started on the pole, led 199 of 200 laps. It wasn't much of a race, was the take last year. We were all waiting for Ricky Stenhouse Jr. to throw a punch at Kyle Busch. But this year, you had passing throughout the night. You had an entertaining event throughout the night. And when you had the way the promoter's caution, which is something we all anticipated, ended up falling, I do think it first of all, it impacted the race. And second of all, I think that's exactly what we wanted. I think we wanted to have an entertaining all-star race that we didn't know who was going to win. I think going into it, Christopher Bell starting on the front row, you know you're not going to have much passing. You know Brad Keselowski or Christopher Bell is really going to have to earn this win. And then when you also know, and Christopher Bell said in his post-race news conference, he wasn't surprised the promoter's caution came out because everybody in the building was aware that Marcus Smith and officials had the ability to use that caution. And eventually they decided they're going to wait and wait and wait until closer and closer to lap 220. They're going to have Michael Waltrip stand there on the stand, and he actually dropped the caution flag. I think that was the most surprising part of the entire thing, was that he actually dropped the yellow flag on the racetrack. You could tell that was not the point. And so it feels like it spiced things up. It got people talking a little bit because it actually impacted the race. The race was going in a way that allowed, Joey Logano, Ryan Blaney decided to stay out. They didn't take tires. Like Christopher Bell got two fresher tires and was able to bolt past Joey Logano and win the All-Star race. Going into it, I mean, I picked Christopher Bell in the Charlotte Observer at charlotteobserver.com. I picked him to win the race in advance. I knew that, I saw it coming. And I think that Christopher Bell saw it, that once that caution was going to come out, you knew it was going to come out, you have to pit, you have to, and that was the plan all along. The other guys tried to be a little more aggressive late, and it didn't work. So the right drivers anticipated the novel concept, and it worked out.
Yeah, a fun race last week in North Wilkesboro. This weekend, the Coke 600 in Charlotte, a Memorial Day tradition. What storylines are you looking at going into this race?
So, first of all, as much parity as there is in the sport right now, every week you've got drivers in the Cup Series after qualifying separated by a second. Most of the field, maybe a second, a little bit more than that, puts them apart. There was a time when you'd have a second separating the top guys. You'd have throughout the field, the drivers in the back of the field did not have that speed. It's getting to a point with the next gen car and with how these different teams are building their race cars that it's anybody's race every week. And then when you have the number 5 car, you've got the number 20 car, you've got those Penske cars sometimes, they are faster. They are better machines. And the guys behind the wheel are more talented race car drivers. And that is why you have Kyle Larson and Christopher Bell dominating races and winning multiple. And you have drivers of other teams figuring out how to get to victory lane, and it becomes harder and harder to win a race. When you have the Coca-Cola 600, the longest race of the NASCAR Cup Series season, the only one that goes from daylight into nighttime, it's a test of skill, it's a test of stamina, and it's a test of who is the most strong race winner in the NASCAR Cup Series. Every week, again, a mile and a half can be a great test of Kyle Larson or Christopher Bell was able to win over the rest of the field. You go down to Talladega and a Penske driver like Austin Cindric gets another win. But when you have a race like we are going to have in Charlotte this weekend, even last year, Christopher Bell winning that race that was shortened by rain, it was still a massive accomplishment for him. And a year before, the last one that went 600 miles was Ryan Blaney. Blaney had a winless streak going of his own at the time. He got the big win at the Coca-Cola 600 to triumph, and he went all the way to the NASCAR Cup Series championship in 2023 after that victory. This is really one of the biggest races of the season. It's a crown jewel. It's all those things, but it's because the person who you see gets a victory lane on Sunday will be one of the most deserved winners of the entire season.
So, who do you think is going to victory lane this Sunday?
Right now, it feels like Kyle Larson is that guy. It feels like nobody's beating him on any track. So if you get the longest race of the year, the biggest race of the year, if he's in his car from when they take the green flag, he's taking that number 5 car to victory lane.
moving on to some other news in NASCAR with the 2311 Furniture Motorsports lawsuit. What have you been hearing about that, and how's that going?
Yeah, so 2311 and racing and Front Row Motorsports, obviously. Furniture Row, previous NASCAR team, FRM has
No.
been Front Row Motorsports. Yeah, and a growing team now in NASCAR. Noah Gregson and Michael Michael McDowell with in the 71 with Spire now. And basically, and Todd Gilliland and Zane Smith, 34 and 38. But yeah, you got those two teams have been suing NASCAR, and at this point, they are still running as charter teams in the NASCAR Cup Series, but they have this lawsuit constantly hanging over their heads, hanging over the sports heads, and at this point, again, the team's continuing to race, and it feels like it is much will be talked about more following this NASCAR Cup Series season. And again, nonetheless, the reigning regular season champion Tyler Reddick is running well this year, but you're seeing Bubba Wallace win some stages. You're seeing Riley Herbst start to get speed in his first year with 2311 Racing, and Noah Gregson and those front row motorsports cars become bigger and bigger as that team builds itself in the NASCAR Cup Series.
So I read that like they could potentially lose their charter this season. Do you think that happens, and what would that do for the drivers and the teams?
Yeah, I don't think they're gonna necessarily this season, but the whole thing is that you don't know how all this is gonna shake out. It felt like even there's a chance that going into this season, they might lose their charters. And in that case, they would be competing as non-chartered teams, which is something that we haven't seen yet before. And so they ended up reaching an agreement before this season that they would maintain their charters and compete with the charters being the numbers of each NASCAR Cup Series team. And so yeah, it feels like this again. It's a cloud that hanging over everybody's head.
Yeah, Shane Connick joining us today on Pirate Radio Live. You also cover Charlotte 49ers football, but we got baseball today in the American Athletic Conference tournament between East Carolina and Charlotte. You said earlier before we started recording you haven't really kept up with it much, but have you seen anything from Charlotte baseball this season?
Yeah, a little bit. Caleb Estes has been playing on the 49ers infield. I graduated from University of Maryland and how the transfer portal works now. He was playing third base for the Terrapins a couple of years back and has been playing that position down in University City.
Yeah, Charlotte kind of impressed me this season, getting the second seed in the American. ECU not really doing what they normally do. They're the sixth seed, but looking to continue their season by beating Charlotte today. Charlotte football is how we know you. You came on our show in the fall, and we just loved your passion, and I wanted to get you back on to talk about Charlotte football's additions and losses this offseason. Biff Poggi out, Tim Albin in. What do you think about that hire?
Yeah, I appreciate you guys. And dude, Tim Albert is a good hire. He is a good head coach who is coming to the American Athletic Conference. He coached at Ohio University, and before all of that, he is from Oklahoma. And I asked him at his opening press conference about when he was growing up in Oklahoma, and he went to go coach is one of his first jobs at Northwestern Oklahoma State University. And he was telling me about how back then in the 1990s, guys were looking to transfer from NAIA schools to Division III schools because they felt, well, if I do well at an NAIA school, then maybe I could get to an NCAA level school. And he was able to keep guys at Northwestern Oklahoma State, and they won a national championship. And the idea was that he likened it to the transfer portal. You had guys who were looking over the shoulder at a bigger level to play. And he said, be here with this team, with this coach, with these teammates, and they won. And so, as he said, sure, we're going to win. The idea really trying to build a culture here in Charlotte, build something here in Charlotte, and build a consistent winning program that fans are proud of. And as the stadium is now expanding and Charlotte is growing, it understands the size of the school it is, that it didn't even have athletics 20 years ago. And so as it keeps growing its fan base, selling out its stadium that is as large as it is, it's going to be expanding, having more sections, and just really growing with the fan base that it has in Charlotte. And Tim Albin, a great leader for it.
I haven't really kept up with what they've been doing in the transfer portal, but have they had a good amount of additions?
They have, and also guys moving around, obviously all over the place. Deshaun Purdy at Wake Forest transferred to, staying in the state. But yeah, they've been active. They've been getting different guys. It feels like that's obviously where we're at in college football and college sports. I mean, even with Biff Poggi, it felt like a different group of guys who Biff would bring in every year with Charlotte. And so this is going to be a really new look group. At the same time, there are plenty of guys who have hung around for years at Charlotte and probably will be around and familiar to the area. And so it's going to be interesting to see what Tim Albin does, but that culture and growing that fan base is what is most important.
You mentioned growing the culture. How long do you think it'll take before they start competing in the American Athletic Conference?
I think already you're starting to see everything you want to see from a promotional standpoint, and that it's just going to take time. I think with how they played up with the non-conference games that they've been scheduling, the level of teams that they're bringing in. I mean, they're going to Athens, Georgia this upcoming season. It's the kind of thing that Charlotte has been scheduling over its head, and I think they understand that. I think that's the point. They want to put themselves on these big stages and play against big time programs. None bigger this year coming up than week 2 when Bill Belichick's North Carolina Tar Heels come in to Jerry Richardson Stadium. That's the kind of stuff that Charlotte wants. Charlotte's not looking to schedule a bunch of non-conference games, roll over them, and then maybe they still are going 500 in the American Athletic Conference. The thing is, they understand they're going to go 1-3 in their non-conference schedule, and so if they keep scheduling their non-conference like this, it's gonna take a while for Charlotte to be seriously making a bowl game or seriously looking to win in the postseason. But I realize the importance of building up the fan base with these games, that you have to bring in the big teams and put yourself on these big stages to be able to knock one of them off and to be able to become the program that you're trying to be.
Yeah, Shane Connuck joining us today. Before we let you go, you mentioned Bill Belichick there. I got to ask you just what you think about him being in Chapel Hill coaching the Tar Heels.
Yeah, that entire thing is something. You see, I am a lifelong fan of the New York Jets, so I like this more. I couldn't hate him anymore. So this is incredible. This really is something.
Yeah, I wish it's funny just seeing all the stuff with Jordan Hudson and everything. But I mean, the greatest coach in NFL history is coaching in the state, and it just seems like everything else is the focus instead of football, and that's really what worries me. I feel like he's just going to come out and steamroll everybody because nobody's been focusing on what's actually going on the field.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, the thing is, though, that's what you want in a lot of ways. And if he brings in a handful of good players and he brings in the right people, and North Carolina football becomes a little bit better, it was in a position where you look at the Tar Heel. It's not like this was such a struggling football program that needed some coach to come in and lift them and take them somewhere. Now it obviously the Belichick's completely taking over for the future with Steve Belichick 5 years later now. And so a really interesting situation in Chapel Hill, changing times in college athletics. And I think UNC is I think it's all noise for now. And again, every week it's gonna be a show that North Carolina wants.
Yeah, college football definitely going to be interesting watch this fall with the all just everything going on with the playoff and Bill Belichick and all that stuff. But Shane, thanks for joining us. Probably reach out to you again this fall to preview ECU and Charlotte coming up in November.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. And then the other thing, I'm wearing the shirt here, the Premier Lacrosse League, the Carolina Chaos. We have one of 8 teams in the Premier Lacrosse League comes to Charlotte June 6th and 7th for the second straight Carolina Chaos homecoming weekend. A year later, they will be playing all their home games here in Charlotte as one of 8 Premier Lacrosse League franchises.
All right, I did not know that. I'll have to check it out. But Shane, before you go, let everybody know where they can catch your work and follow you.
Shane_Connuck on X, and you can read it all at charlotteobserver.com.
All right, thanks, Shane. Have a good one.
Thank you, guys.